She begged them to spare her dog, never mentioning who her husband was. The wind cut across the frozen bridge like a blade, carrying Margaret Walker's terrified breath into the mountain air. Her small dog trembled against her chest as two massive figures closed in from either side. Tony, tattooed arms flexed and ready, and Norman, grinning with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. "Please," Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible over the creek rushing below. "Just let us go." Norman kicked at the dog. It yelped. Margaret pulled it tighter. "Nobody out here but us," Tony said, grabbing her shoulder. "And nobody's coming for you." He was wrong. With shaking hands, Margaret reached for her phone. One call. That's all she managed before Norman slapped it from her grip, sending it skittering across the icy planks. But the call had already connected. 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking Seoul, Gun-woo heard his wife's scream cut through the line. He didn't curse, didn't shout. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white, and when he finally spoke, his voice was colder than the bridge where Margaret knelt. "Find them." Tony and Norman had no idea they'd just signed their own death warrants. They thought they'd beaten a defenseless woman. What they'd actually done was wake up one of the most feared men in Asia, and he was already on his way. These men made the worst mistake of their lives. Margaret's knees pressed into the frost-coated wood, pain radiating through her legs as she clutched Miso tighter. The little dog's heart hammered against her palm, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. She could feel the vibrations of heavy boots on the bridge, one set behind her, one circling to her left. "You hear that?" Norman's voice cut through the wind. "That's silence. That's what it sounds like when nobody gives a damn about you." Tony laughed, the sound harsh and metallic. His shadow fell over her like a shroud. "We've been watching you for weeks, sweetheart. Every morning, same walk, same bridge, same lonely routine." He crouched down, his breath hot against her ear. "You don't even have neighbors who'd notice you missing." Margaret kept her eyes down, her fingers buried in Miso's fur. The dog was still shaking, a low whimper building in his throat. She knew that sound. He was scared, but he was also ready to fight. She squeezed him gently, silently begging him not to. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Tony snarled. She didn't move fast enough. His hand shot out and grabbed her jaw, forcing her face up. The cold air stung her eyes, or maybe those were tears. She couldn't tell anymore. His grip tightened until she felt her teeth grinding together. "That's better," he said. "Now here's how this works. You give us whatever's in that little purse of yours, and maybe we don't throw that rat over the side of this bridge." Norman moved closer, his boots scraping deliberately across the planks. "I don't like dogs much anyway, especially the yappy ones." Miso barked. Sharp, protective, fearless. "Shut that thing up," Norman said. Margaret pulled Miso closer, turning her body to shield him. "Please, he's just scared. I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't." Tony's backhand caught her across the cheek. The world tilted. She tasted copper. Miso erupted into furious barking, his small body rigid with rage. "I said shut it up." Through the ringing in her ears, Margaret heard herself speaking, words tumbling out in a desperate stream. "I have $60. It's in my pocket. Take it. Take all of it. Just please." $60? Norman kicked at her hip, not hard enough to topple her but enough to make his point. "You think we came all the way out here for $60? You think that's what this is?" Tony grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "This is about respect. About teaching people like you that you don't belong here, walking around like you own the place. My family's been in this town for generations, and now we got people like you moving in, thinking you're safe." Margaret's free hand crept toward her jacket pocket. Her phone. If she could just... Tony saw the movement. His boot came down on her wrist, grinding it into the frozen wood. She cried out, her grip on Miso loosening for just a second. The dog squirmed free and launched himself at Tony's leg, teeth bared. "You little..." Tony kicked, his boot connecting with Miso's ribs. The dog yelped and tumbled across the bridge, sliding toward the edge. "No!" Margaret lunged forward, but Norman caught her by the collar, dragging her back. "Stay down," he hissed. Miso scrambled to his feet, limping but alive. He positioned himself between Margaret and the two men, growling with everything his tiny body could muster. Blood trickled from his mouth. Something broke inside Margaret. Not her will, not her dignity, something deeper. The part of her that had stayed quiet all these months, that had convinced herself staying invisible meant staying safe. That part shattered like ice under pressure. Her hand shot into her pocket. Fingers closed around her phone. She didn't look at the screen, didn't try to unlock it. She just pressed the emergency call button. The one Gunwoo had programmed to reach him directly, no matter where he was, no matter what time. The phone rang once. Norman noticed. "What are you?" He snatched at her, but she twisted away. The phone pressed against her chest. It rang again. Tony stepped on Miso's tail. The dog screamed. The phone clicked. Connection established. "Margaret." Gunwoo's voice, distant but clear. Calm. Always calm. "Gun." She started to say his name, but Tony was faster. He ripped the phone from her hand and raised his arm to throw it into the creek below. Then he stopped, because he heard it too. That voice on the other end. Not panicked. Not shouting. Just speaking in Korean, each word precise and measured, like a judge reading a sentence. "Margaret, tell me where you are." Tony looked at the phone in his hand, then at Margaret. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Norman grabbed the phone from him. "Who the hell is this?" "Her boyfriend." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Listen here, buddy. Your girl just learned a valuable lesson about." "Put her on," Gunwoo said. His English was perfect, barely accented. "Now." "Or what?" Norman's grin widened. "You gonna come out here and—" He didn't finish. Gunwoo had hung up. Norman stared at the dead phone, then hurled it over the edge of the bridge. They all heard the splash as it hit the water below. "Whoever that was," Norman said, turning back to Margaret. "He's not coming. Nobody's coming. You understand that?" Margaret understood something else entirely. She'd heard Gunwoo's tone, the specific cadence of his words when he switched to Korean. She didn't speak the language fluently, but she'd been married to him long enough to recognize certain phrases. The ones he used when he was done negotiating. Tony grabbed Miso by the scruff of his neck. The dog thrashed, yelping, but couldn't break free. "Maybe we should see if this thing can swim." "Don't," Margaret said. Her voice had changed. Steadier now. "Don't do this." "Or what?" Tony dangled Miso over the bridge railing. "What are you gonna do about it?" Margaret slowly got to her feet. Her wrist throbbed. Her cheek was swelling. Blood dripped from her split lip. But she stood, and she looked Tony directly in the eyes. "It's not what I'm going to do," she said quietly. "It's what you just did." Norman laughed. "What, make a phone call? Scare your boyfriend?" "Sweetheart, we don't care who you know. This is our town. Our rules." Margaret didn't argue. She just watched as Tony pulled Miso back from the edge, clearly enjoying the prolonged torture more than a quick finish. She watched as Norman pocketed her $60. She watched as they shoved her one more time, sending her sprawling across the bridge. "Stay down there," Tony said, "and maybe think twice before you go walking alone again." They left her there on the frozen bridge, laughing as they walked away. Miso limped back to her, whimpering, and she pulled him into her arms. She checked him over with shaking hands. Bruised ribs, maybe, cut in his mouth, but alive. She held him and waited, because Gunwoo was already moving. She knew that much. The clock had started the moment that call connected, and Tony and Norman had just used up whatever time they had left. They just didn't know it yet. Gunwoo stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Seoul penthouse. The phone still warm against his ear even though the line had gone dead. Below him, the city pulsed with light, millions of people going about their lives, unaware that in the last 90 seconds, two men had just carved their names into a very short list. He didn't move, didn't curse, didn't throw the phone or punch the wall or do any of the theatrical things that men did when they were pretending to be dangerous. He simply stood there, listening to the silence where his wife's voice had been, and felt something old and cold settle into his chest. Behind him, Minjun looked up from his laptop. "Sir." Gunwoo held up one finger. "Wait, He replayed the call in his mind. Margaret's voice, tight with fear but trying to stay calm. The sound of impact, flesh on flesh. A dog barking. Then male voices, rough and confident, the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. American accents. Rural. The wind suggested open space. And beneath it all, the particular echo that only came from being over water. The bridge, he said quietly. Near the house. Minjun was already typing. I'm pulling up satellite imagery now. Gunwoo walked to his desk and pressed the intercom. Mobilize the advance team. I want a plane ready in 30 minutes. Full manifest. Yes, sir, came the immediate response. He released the button and looked at Minjun. Show me. The laptop screen filled with an overhead view of the mountain town where Margaret had chosen to live. She'd wanted space, she'd said. Quiet. A place where she could breathe without feeling Gunwoo's world pressing in on her. He'd bought her the house without hesitation, staffed it with security she didn't know about, and visited when his business allowed, which wasn't often enough, which was why she'd been alone on that bridge. Minjun zoomed in on a narrow wooden structure spanning a creek. Here, only bridge within walking distance of the property. Creek feeds into the Clearwater River. Town is 8 miles east. Population, 4,000. Small. Insular. Police force of 12 officers, mostly traffic and domestic calls. Last major crime was a theft 3 years ago. Gunwoo studied the terrain. Mountain roads, limited access points, the kind of place where strangers stood out. Good for privacy. Bad for quick response. Margaret would have walked that bridge every morning with Miso, same routine, same time. Easy to predict. Easy to target. Find out who they are, Gunwoo said. I want names, addresses, family connections, criminal history, bank accounts, phone records. Everything. Minjun's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'll need access to local law enforcement databases. You have it. Sir, that could take. You have 20 minutes. Minjun swallowed and nodded. Yes, sir. Gunwoo turned back to the window. His reflection stared back at him, face calm, expression neutral. People often mistook that calm for weakness. They thought men who controlled their emotions were somehow less dangerous than the ones who shouted and threatened. They were wrong. The ones who stayed calm were the ones who'd learned to channel everything into precision. His phone buzzed. A text from the airfield. Plane ready in 22 minutes. Another buzz. His brother, Jae-sung, calling from Tokyo. Gunwoo answered. I heard, Jae-sung said without preamble. What do you need? Clean the house, Gunwoo said. Everything we have in the western United States. Pull it back. I don't want complications. You're going yourself. Yes. A pause. Gunwoo, if this is about Margaret, if someone touches your wife, what do you do? Another pause, longer this time. I'll have our people out of the region in 6 hours. Do you want support on the ground? No. This is personal. Personal can be messy. Gunwoo's jaw tightened. It won't be. He ended the call and turned back to Minjun. Status. I'm in their system now. Running facial recognition on known offenders in the area. If they have records, we'll have them. Gunwoo walked to his safe and entered the combination. Inside were 3 passports, all legitimate, all under different names. He selected the Canadian one. Harder to trace, easier to explain if questioned. Below the passport sat a handgun he hoped he wouldn't need and a leather wallet containing cash in multiple currencies. Got them, Minjun said. Tony Russo, 34. Norman Webb, 37. Both have priors. Assault, theft, drug possession. Tony did 18 months for armed robbery 5 years ago. Norman's charges kept getting dismissed. Looks like his uncle is a county supervisor. Gunwoo moved behind Minjun to look at the screen. 2 faces stared back at him from mugshots. Tony, bald and tattooed, trying to look tough for the camera. Norman, smirking like the whole thing was a joke. Gunwoo memorized every detail. The shape of their faces. The way they held their heads. The look in their eyes that said they'd never really paid for anything they'd done. That was about to change. Addresses, Gunwoo said. Tony lives in a trailer park off Route 40. Norman has a house on Maple Street, residential area. both within town limits. Employment. Tony works part-time at a garage. Norman claims disability but drives a new truck. Draw your own conclusions. Gunwoo drew them. Who else? Sir. Who else do they associate with? Who protects them? Minjun clicked through screens. Norman's uncle is Howard Webb, county supervisor, like I said. Connected to the sheriff's department. Tony's cousin runs the local bar where most of the off-duty cops drink. They're protected, sir. Small-town protection, but it's real. Gunwoo nodded slowly. He'd expected as much. Men like Tony and Norman always had someone covering for them. That's why they stayed bold. That's why they thought they could corner a woman on a bridge and walk away clean. Send me everything, Gunwoo said. I want it on my phone before I board. Done. Sir, what about Margaret? Should we send someone to check on her? Gunwoo had already thought about that. If he sent people now, it would alert anyone watching. It would signal that Margaret wasn't as alone as she appeared. Better to let Tony and Norman think they'd won. Let them relax. Let them go home and celebrate and tell their friends about the woman they'd put in her place. No, Gunwoo said. She's strong enough to wait. He hated saying it. Hated knowing she was hurt and scared and he wasn't there. But this wasn't about his feelings. This was about doing it right. Margaret had survived the initial attack. Now she needed him to finish it properly. Minjun hesitated. Sir, I have to ask. How far are we taking this? Gunwoo looked at the faces on the screen one more time. They put their hands on my wife. They threatened to kill her dog. They made her beg. He picked up his passport and wallet. How far do you think? Minjun didn't answer. He didn't need to. Gunwoo's phone buzzed again. The plane was ready. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. Minjun. Yes, sir? When I land, I want to know where they are, who they're with, and what they're doing every single second. I want their phones tracked. I want their credit cards monitored. If they so much as buy a cup of coffee, I want to know about it. Understood. Gunwoo opened the door, then paused. And Minjun? Find out if they have dogs. Minjun looked up, confused. Sir, just find out. Gunwoo walked out into the hallway. The elevator was waiting. As the doors closed, he pulled out his phone and opened the photo gallery. The most recent picture showed Margaret on their anniversary, laughing at something he'd said. Miso curled in her lap. She looked happy, safe. He'd failed to keep her that way. But failure was temporary. What came next was permanent. The elevator descended toward the garage where a car was already running. 15 hours from now, he'd be in that mountain town. And Tony and Norman would learn what it meant to touch something that belonged to him. Tony cracked open his third beer and leaned back in the sagging recliner that had been in his trailer since before his prison stint. The television flickered with some reality show he wasn't watching. His knuckles still ached from where they'd connected with that woman's face. A satisfying reminder of the afternoon's work. Best part, he said, taking a long pull from the bottle, was when she tried to call someone. Like anybody gives a damn. Norman sat across from him on the stained couch, feet propped on the coffee table littered with pizza boxes and ashtrays. He scrolled through his phone, half listening. Should have seen her face when I threw that phone in the creek. Pure panic. Think she'll report it? Norman snorted. To who? Sheriff Patterson? He's drinking at my cousin's bar right now. Besides, what's she gonna say? 2 guys roughed her up and she can't prove a damn thing? No witnesses. No cameras. No evidence. He looked up from his phone. That's the beauty of this town, Tony. We know how things work here. Tony grinned and raised his beer. To knowing people. Norman clinked his bottle against Tony's. To knowing people. They drank. Outside. The trailer park was quiet except for a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Tony thought about that little rat dog. The way it had tried to defend its owner. Pathetic. He'd kicked plenty of dogs in his time, but there was something extra satisfying about hurting one that actually tried to fight back. His phone buzzed. Text from his cousin Jake at the garage. You still coming in tomorrow? Tony typed back one-handed. Yeah. Morning shift. Life went on. That's what people didn't understand about guys like him and Norman. They could do whatever they wanted and still just go back to their regular routines. Work, drink, sleep, repeat. The world kept spinning, and nobody cared enough to stop it. You think she learned her lesson? Norman asked. About what? About walking around like she belongs here. About thinking she's safe. Tony crushed his empty beer can and tossed it toward the overflowing trash bag in the corner. It bounced off and rolled under the table. If she didn't, we can always teach her again. Not like she's going anywhere. Saw the property records, remember? She owns that house. Paid cash for it. Probably some settlement money or something. Norman's eyes lit up. You thinking what I'm thinking? That we didn't get nearly enough today? Yeah, I'm thinking it. They both laughed. The television droned on. Another beer opened with a hiss. What they didn't notice was the car that had parked 3 trailers down an hour ago. Dark sedan, tinted windows, no plates visible from their angle. What they didn't see was the man inside that car, watching their trailer through a telephoto lens, documenting every movement, every visitor, every routine. Norman's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. What? Tony asked. Weird. My credit card just got declined. Which one? The Visa. I was trying to order some parts online. Norman pulled up his banking app, waiting for it to load. Had like 1,500 on there last time I checked. Tony reached for another beer. Probably just fraud protection. Happens to me all the time. Yeah, probably. But Norman kept staring at his phone. The app finally loaded. His balance showed 0. What the hell? What? My account's empty. Tony sat up. Empty like overdrawn or empty like $0.00. Says there was a wire transfer this afternoon cleaning out the whole thing. To where? Doesn't say. Just says external transfer. Norman's thumb moved frantically across the screen, trying to find more information. This is bullshit. Someone hacked my account. Tony's buzz was fading. Call the bank. It's after hours. I'll have to wait until tomorrow. Norman threw his phone on the couch. Probably some scammer in India or something. They'll fix it. Yeah, Tony said. But something cold had settled in his stomach. He told himself it was paranoia. Prison did that to you, made you jumpy. But still. Empty bank account the same day they'd roughed up that woman? Coincidence. Had to be. Norman grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Let's just watch something. I'll deal with it tomorrow. They sat in silence for a while, drinking, trying to recapture the easy satisfaction they'd felt an hour ago. But it was harder now. The trailer felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Tony's phone buzzed again. Another text from Jake. Hey man, boss wants to talk to you tomorrow. Something about your schedule. Tony typed back. What about it? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, he didn't say, just said be there early. Tony stared at the message. His boss never wanted to talk about schedules. You showed up, you worked, you got paid. That was it. Norman. Yeah. You notice anything weird today? Besides the bank thing? Norman muted the television. Like what? I don't know. Just a feeling. You getting paranoid on me? Norman tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. We did everything right. No cameras on that bridge. No witnesses. Even if she did tell someone, there's no proof. Tony wanted to believe that. He did believe that, but the feeling wouldn't go away. His phone buzzed a 3rd time. Not a text. A call. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Yeah. Silence on the other end. Not dead air. Someone was there. He could hear breathing. Hello, Tony said. The line clicked off. He stared at his phone. Wrong number, he muttered. Norman was looking at his own phone again, face pale in the glow of the screen. Tony. What? Check your social media. Why? Just check it. Tony opened Facebook. His notifications had exploded. Dozens of messages, friend requests, comments on old posts. He clicked on one of the messages. Is this you? The message read along with a link. He clicked it. The link took him to a public post in a local crime watch group. Someone had shared his mugshot from 5 years ago along with Norman's. Below the photos, a caption. Anyone know these two? Spotted harassing a woman near Clearwater Bridge today. Tony's chest tightened. Who posted this? It's a fake account, created today. No profile picture. Norman was scrolling frantically. But it's been shared 40 times already. People are commenting. Tony read through the comments. Most were generic outrage, the kind of keyboard warrior stuff that never amounted to anything. But a few caught his eye. These guys are trash. Norman's uncle protects him. Tony Russo. Lives in Pine Valley Trailer Park. Unit 47. Someone should do something about them. His address. Someone had posted his address. Delete it, Tony said. Report the post. Get it taken down. I'm trying. Facebook says it doesn't violate community standards. Norman's hands were shaking now. How did someone even get these photos? And how did they know about today? Tony stood up, suddenly needing to move. He went to the window and pulled back the curtain. The trailer park looked normal. A few lights on in neighboring units. The usual cars parked in their usual spots. And that dark sedan 3 trailers down that he was pretty sure hadn't been there this morning. Norman. What? When did that car get here? Tony pointed. Norman joined him at the window. They both stared at the sedan. Nothing happened. No one got out. No movement at all. Maybe it's just someone visiting, Norman said. But his voice had lost its confidence. Tony let the curtain fall. I'm gonna go check. Don't. Just leave it. But Tony was already grabbing his jacket. The beer had burned off, replaced by something sharper. Fear, maybe. Or anger. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. He stepped out into the cold night air. His boots crunched on gravel as he walked toward the sedan. 3 trailers down felt like 3 miles. The car just sat there, dark and silent. As he got closer, he could see the windows were tinted too dark to be legal. 10 feet away. 5 feet. He raised his hand to knock on the window. The engine started. Tony jumped back. The sedan pulled out slowly, almost casually, and drove away. He tried to see the license plate, but there wasn't one. Or maybe there was, and he just couldn't see it in the dark. The car turned left at the exit and disappeared. Tony stood there in the cold, heart hammering, telling himself it was nothing. Just someone lost. Just someone who'd stopped to check their phone or make a call or any of 1,000 innocent reasons. But when he walked back to his trailer and saw Norman standing in the doorway, pale and tense, he knew they were both thinking the same thing. That woman. That phone call. That voice on the other end asking where she was. It's nothing, Tony said, pushing past Norman into the warmth of the trailer. Just someone who took a wrong turn. Norman closed the door and locked it. Then locked the deadbolt. Then put the chain on. Neither of them said anything else. They sat back down and turned the television up louder and drank their beers and tried very hard not to think about the fact that someone was watching them. And whoever it was knew exactly what they'd done. Tony didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that dark sedan pulling away, its absence somehow more threatening than its presence. By the time gray light filtered through his trailer's thin curtains, he'd convinced himself it was paranoia. Prison had done that to him, made him see threats in shadows. He made coffee and checked his phone. 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. No voicemails, just the calls over and over starting around 3 in the morning. He blocked each number and tried to shake off the unease crawling up his spine. His shift at the garage started at 7. He showered, dressed, and drove his beat-up Ford through empty streets to Jake's auto body. The bay doors were already open, Jake's truck parked in its usual spot. But when Tony walked in, he found his cousin standing by the coffee maker with his arms crossed and his jaw set in that way that meant bad news. "We need to talk," Jake said. Tony grabbed a mug. "Your text said something about my schedule." "There is no schedule. Not anymore." Jake wouldn't meet his eyes. "I gotta let you go, man." The mug stopped halfway to Tony's lips. "What?" "Boss's orders. Came down last night. You're done." "Why?" "I've been here 3 years. Never missed a shift. Never." "It's not about your work." Jake finally looked at him. "Someone called the shop yesterday. Said they were from the state licensing board. Said they were investigating complaints about our certifications, our insurance, everything. Then this morning, boss gets an email saying the investigation goes away if we cut ties with you." Tony set the mug down before he could drop it. That's illegal. They can't do that. Maybe, maybe not. Boss doesn't care. He's not risking his business for anybody, including you. Jake pulled an envelope from his back pocket. Here's what we owe you. I'm sorry, Tony. I really am. Tony took the envelope without opening it. His hands felt numb. This is about yesterday. What happened yesterday? Nothing. Forget it. Tony turned to leave, then stopped. Who called? Did they give a name? No name. Boss said the guy had an accent. Asian, maybe. He wasn't sure. The coffee in Tony's stomach turned to acid. He walked out into the morning sun and sat in his truck for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. His phone rang. Norman. Please tell me your day is going better than mine, Norman said. I just got fired. Silence. Then, my disability check didn't come through. Called the office 3 times. They keep saying there's a problem with my file and they're investigating. Meanwhile, my bank account is still empty, and they're saying it'll take 5 to 7 business days to investigate the transfer. Tony started his truck. Where are you? Home. Where else would I be? Stay there. I'm coming over. Norman's house sat in a neighborhood that had seen better days, probably around the time Norman's parents were still alive. The lawn needed mowing. Paint peeled from the siding. But it was his, paid off with money from his parents' life insurance, and that had always given him a sense of security that Tony envied. That security was cracking now. Tony could see it in the way Norman opened the door, eyes bloodshot and darting, checking the street before letting Tony inside. Something's wrong, Norman said, closing the door. Something's really wrong. They sat in Norman's kitchen. Empty beer cans from the night before still littered the counter. Norman's laptop was open, browser tabs multiplying across the screen as he tried to make sense of what was happening. My disability. Your job. My bank account. Norman ticked them off on his fingers. This isn't random. This is coordinated. You think it's about yesterday. What else could it be? We rough up some woman and suddenly our lives are falling apart. Norman laughed, but it sounded desperate. But that doesn't make sense. She's nobody. Just some woman living alone. Tony thought about the voice on the phone, the accent Jake mentioned, the way that Sedan had sat outside his trailer, watching. Maybe she's not nobody. Norman's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. It's my uncle. Answer it. Norman put it on speaker. Uncle Howard? Norman. Howard Webb's voice came through tight and clipped. I need you to tell me what you did. What do you mean? Don't play stupid with me. I got a call this morning from the state attorney's office. They're opening an investigation into county contracts. Specifically, contracts I approved. They mentioned your name. They mentioned irregularities. They mentioned fraud. Norman stood up so fast his chair tipped over. I didn't do anything. Then why are they asking about you? Why are they pulling records from the last 5 years? Why did I just get a letter saying my position is under review pending the outcome of this investigation? Uncle Howard, I swear. You listen to me. Whatever you're mixed up in, you fix it. Today. Because if I go down, you're going down harder. You understand me? The line went dead. Norman stared at his phone like it had grown teeth. He hung up on me. He never hangs up on me. Tony's own phone buzzed. Text from a number he didn't know. No words. Just a photo. He opened it and felt his blood go cold. The image showed him and Norman on the bridge yesterday. The angle was from above, probably a drone or satellite. The timestamp in the corner read exactly when they'd been there. And in the foreground, clear as day, was Margaret on her knees, miso clutched to her chest. Norman, Tony said quietly. Look at this. Norman looked. His face went gray. Where did you get that? Someone just sent it to me. Another text came through. This time with words. Delete this and 10 more copies appear. Screenshot it and it goes to every news outlet in the state. You have something I want. We should talk. Tony's hands were shaking. What do we have that anyone wants? We took $60 and scared some woman. Norman was pacing now, running his hands over his head. That phone call. Remember? She called someone before I threw her phone. What if that someone has money? What if they're connected? Connected to what? The state attorney? The licensing board? My boss. I don't know. Norman's voice cracked. But someone is doing this. Someone with resources. Someone who can dig up dirt on my uncle and get you fired and freeze bank accounts. He stopped pacing. Someone who knew exactly where we were yesterday and has proof. Tony looked at the photo again. The clarity was too good. The angle was too perfect. This wasn't amateur hour. This was professional surveillance. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but Norman nodded frantically. Tony swiped to accept. Yeah. Tony Russo. The voice was calm, measured, with a trace of an accent. We need to discuss your actions yesterday. Who is this? Someone who cares very much about Margaret Walker. The woman you assaulted. The woman whose dog you threatened to kill. Tony's throat went dry. Listen, that was just what? Just a bit of fun? Just teaching someone a lesson. The voice stayed calm, but something underneath it made Tony's skin crawl. You made a mistake, Tony. You hurt someone under my protection. Now we're going to correct that mistake. What do you want? I want you to understand something. The job you lost? That's not coming back. The bank account? That money is gone. Your uncle's investigation? That's real and it's going to get worse. And this is just the beginning. Norman grabbed Tony's arm, mouthing, "Put it on speaker." Tony did. You there, Norman? The voice said. I know you're listening. Norman's eyes widened. How? I know everything about you. I know Norman Webb Jr. lives at 247 Maple Street. I know he collects disability for a back injury that doesn't exist. I know his uncle has been covering up his criminal history for years. I know Tony Russo lives in Unit 47 at Pine Valley Trailer Park. I know he's violated his parole 6 times, but his cousin Jake kept that information quiet. Should I continue? Neither of them spoke. Good. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to feel pressure. Real pressure. Your money will dry up. Your protections will disappear. Your friends will stop returning calls. And you're going to wonder when it will end. When? Tony managed to ask. When I decide you've paid enough. Or when you do something stupid and force me to end this permanently. Your choice. The line went dead. Tony and Norman stared at each other. Outside, a car door slammed. They both jumped. Norman went to the window and pulled back the curtain. A police cruiser sat at the curb. Officer Patterson, Norman's usual contact in the department, was walking up the driveway. Maybe he's here to help, Norman said, already moving toward the door. But when he opened it, Patterson's face was stone. Norman Webb, I need you to come down to the station. We have some questions about your disability claims. What? Patterson. Come on, you know me. I know you, which is why I'm asking nicely instead of bringing a warrant. But we're doing this today. You can ride with me or follow in your own vehicle, but we're going now. Norman looked back at Tony, panic clear in his eyes. Tony wanted to say something reassuring, but he had nothing. Patterson was someone they'd counted on, someone Norman's family had owned for years, and now he was treating Norman like a stranger. I'll follow, Norman said weakly. Patterson nodded and walked back to his cruiser. Norman grabbed his keys with shaking hands. This is happening, he said. This is really happening. Tony watched Norman drive away behind the police cruiser. Then he got in his own truck and just sat there, engine off, trying to understand how 24 hours could destroy everything they built. The protections they'd relied on were vanishing like smoke. And somewhere, someone was orchestrating all of it with surgical precision. His phone buzzed one more time. Another text. Another photo. This one showed him sitting in his truck right now, taken from somewhere across the street. Below it, a single word. Watching. Tony looked up, scanning windows and roof lines, but saw nothing. He started his truck and drove home with his hands locked on the wheel, knowing that every turn, every stop, every moment was being documented by someone he couldn't see. Someone who wasn't done with them yet. Tony spent the next 2 hours driving in circles, checking his mirrors every 30 seconds, seeing threats in every car that stayed behind him too long. He finally parked at a gas station on the edge of town and went inside to buy a pack of cigarettes he didn't need. His hands shook as he paid with crumpled bills from the severance envelope. The clerk, a kid maybe 19 with acne scars, gave him a strange look. "You okay, man?" Tony didn't answer. He walked back outside and lit a cigarette, his first in 3 years. The smoke burned going down, but it gave him something to focus on besides the crawling sensation on the back of his neck. His phone rang. "Norman. Tell me you're not calling from jail," Tony said. "I'm not. They let me go after 2 hours. But Tony, it's bad. They have records. Real records. Dates I claimed I couldn't work matched up with dates I was seen around town doing physical labor. Security footage from the hardware store showing me lifting 50-pound bags of concrete. They have everything. How? I don't know. Patterson said it came from an anonymous tip, but the documentation is too detailed. Someone's been following me for months. Maybe longer." Norman's breathing was ragged. "They're building a fraud case. Patterson said I should get a lawyer. He wouldn't even look at me, Tony. He's scared." Tony took a drag and watched a minivan pull up to Pump 3. Normal people doing normal things. He used to be one of them. Yesterday morning felt like a year ago. "We need to find out who she is," Tony said. "The woman. Margaret something. How does that help? Because whoever's doing this, they're doing it for her. Which means she matters to someone with serious resources. We find out who she is. Maybe we understand what we're up against." Norman was quiet for a moment. "I know a guy at the county assessor's office. Owes me a favor. I can get property records." "Do it. Call me back." Tony finished his cigarette and immediately lit another. A black SUV pulled into the gas station and parked 2 spaces away. Tinted windows. Engine running. Nobody got out. He stared at it. The SUV stared back. Tony stubbed out his cigarette and got in his truck. As he pulled away, the SUV stayed put. He told himself it meant nothing. Told himself he was losing it. But when he checked his mirror 3 blocks later, the SUV was there, keeping a careful distance. His phone rang again. Norman calling back faster than expected. "Got it," Norman said. "Property at 1847, Ridgeline Road, purchased 14 months ago. Owner of record is Margaret Walker. Paid $375,000 cash." Tony pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. The SUV drove past without slowing. "Walker. That her married name or maiden name?" "Doesn't say. But here's the thing. I had him dig deeper. The wire transfer for the property came from an international account. Singapore. Business name listed as Daehan Holdings." "What's Daehan?" "Korean word. Means great or grand or something. It's a Korean company, Tony." Tony's stomach dropped. The accent Jake mentioned. The voice on the phone. The surgical precision of everything falling apart. "Keep going." I Googled it. Daehan Holdings is a shell company. No public information except a registered address in Seoul. But when I searched Margaret Walker with Korean connections, I found something else. Norman's voice got quieter. "There's a Margaret Walker who married a Korean national 8 years ago in Los Angeles. Small ceremony, barely any records. But I found a photo from some society page. And her husband's name is Kim Gun-woo." The name meant nothing to Tony. So I searched that name. Norman was breathing fast now. "Tony, there are message boards, forums, places where people talk about organized crime in Asia. And that name comes up. A lot." Tony's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of organized crime?" "The Korean kind. The serious kind. There's not much solid information because nobody wants to talk about him directly. But from what I'm piecing together, Kim Gun-woo runs operations across Korea, Japan, parts of Southeast Asia. Money laundering, smuggling, protection rackets. He's connected to politicians, police, corporations. And Tony," Norman's voice cracked. "People are afraid of him. Really afraid. There are stories about people who crossed him just disappearing or losing everything they had before they could even understand what happened." Tony stared through his windshield at families walking into McDonald's. Kids begging for Happy Meals. The mundane reality of a Wednesday afternoon. None of them knew that 2 men were sitting in vehicles across town, having their entire understanding of the world collapse. "You're telling me," Tony said slowly, "that the woman we beat up on that bridge is married to a Korean mob boss. I'm telling you that the voice on the phone, the one who knew everything about us, might be one of the most dangerous men in Asia. And we put our hands on his wife." Tony ended the call. He sat there for 5 full minutes, watching people come and go, trying to make his brain accept what he'd just learned. Every lost job, every frozen account, every vanishing protection suddenly made perfect sense. They hadn't pissed off some local nobody. They'd declared war on someone who had the resources to dismantle their entire existence without ever setting foot in their town. His phone buzzed. Text from a new number. This time it was a link. Tony's finger hesitated over it, but he clicked anyway. The link opened to a news article from a Korean publication, automatically translated to English. The headline read, "Businessman Kim Gun-woo spotted at Seoul Charity Gala." The photo showed an Asian man in an expensive suit, probably late 30s, standing next to a black woman in an elegant dress. Even in the formal photo, there was something about his eyes that made Tony's skin crawl. Cold, calculating, the look of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. And next to him, smiling softly, was Margaret. Same woman from the bridge, but transformed. Confident, protected, loved. Another text came through. "Now you know who you touched. Now you understand what's coming." Tony's phone rang immediately. Norman again. "Did you get a link?" Norman asked. "Yeah. That's him. That's actually him. Tony, I've been reading more. This guy doesn't just have money. He has people. Trained people. The kind who know how to make problems disappear. The kind who..." Norman's voice broke. "We're dead. We're actually dead. We're not dead." "How do you know?" "Because if he wanted us dead, we'd already be dead." Tony started his truck. "He's playing with us, showing us he can take everything away piece by piece. He wants us to suffer first." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" Tony didn't have an answer for that. He drove back toward his trailer, mind racing through impossible scenarios. Run? They'd never make it. Fight? Against what? An international crime organization. Apologize? To a man whose wife they'd beaten and whose dog they'd threatened to kill? There was no good option. There never had been. They'd made their choice on that bridge, and now they were living with the consequences. When he pulled into Pine Valley Trailer Park, he noticed immediately that something was wrong. His neighbors were outside, clustered in small groups, all looking at his trailer. As he parked, Mrs. Chun from Unit 52 hurried over. "Tony, the police were here," she said. "With a warrant. They searched your place." "For what?" "They wouldn't say, but they took boxes. Lots of boxes." She lowered her voice. "There were drugs, Tony. They found drugs in your trailer." "That's impossible. I don't do drugs. I don't even drink hard liquor anymore. I'm just telling you what I saw. They took photos, documented everything, said they'd be back." She looked at him with something like pity. "What did you do?" Tony walked past her to his trailer. The door hung open, yellow police tape across the frame. Inside was chaos. Drawers emptied, couch cushions sliced open. And on his coffee table, right where anyone could see it, sat a clear bag of white powder that absolutely had not been there this morning. He backed out slowly, hands raised even though no one was there to see. Someone had planted evidence. Someone with access to his trailer, to police connections, to the kind of pull that could make a search warrant appear in hours. His phone rang. The same unknown number from before. "See how easy this is?" the voice said. "Your trailer. Norman's house. Your cousin's bar. Your uncle's office. We can put anything anywhere. We can make you guilty of anything we want. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. What do you want from us?" Tony's voice came out as a whisper. "I want you to understand that you're not in control. You never were. Men like you operate because men like me allow it. We let you think you're powerful. We let you think you're protected. But the moment you step out of line, the moment you touch something that belongs to us, all that imaginary power disappears. We didn't know. We didn't know who she was. You didn't care. That's the real problem. You saw a woman alone and decided she was prey. You made assumptions based on how she looked, where she lived, who you thought would protect her. You were wrong about all of it." Tony heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. "Are those for me?" "Yes. Possession with intent to distribute. That's 5 to 10 years, Tony. And your parole violation means you serve the maximum. Of course, the drugs will disappear before trial. The case will fall apart. But not before you sit in county lockup for a few months wondering if this is your new reality. Please, Tony said, and hated himself for it. Please, we made a mistake. We're sorry. Are you sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught? Tony couldn't answer that honestly. That's what I thought, the voice said. The police will be there in 2 minutes. You can run, but that only makes it worse. You can fight, but that adds resisting arrest. Or you can accept that this is happening and maybe, I'll decide you've learned your lesson. What about Norman? Norman gets his own consequences. You don't get to worry about him anymore. You only get to worry about yourself. The sirens were close now, maybe 2 streets away. Tony looked at his trailer, at the planted evidence, at the neighbors watching him like he was already convicted. Everything he'd built since getting out of prison, every effort to stay clean and keep his head down, had been erased in 48 hours. Why? He asked. Why go through all this? Why not just kill us? The voice was quiet for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something almost thoughtful in its tone. Because Margaret asked me not to. She said you're still human beings, that everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. So I'm giving you that chance. You get to live. You get to rebuild. But you'll do it knowing that every single thing you have can be taken away in an instant. You'll do it knowing that somewhere, I'm still watching. And if you ever think about hurting another person who looks vulnerable, who looks alone, who looks like easy prey, you'll remember this feeling. 3 police cars turned into the trailer park. Goodbye, Tony Russo, the voice said. Use this time wisely. The line went dead. Tony set his phone on the hood of his truck and put his hands behind his head. As the officers approached with weapons drawn, as Mrs. Chun gasped and pulled her grandkids inside, as his entire world collapsed around him, Tony finally understood the truth. They hadn't beaten up a random woman on a bridge. They'd picked a fight with a ghost who had the resources of a small country and the patience to destroy them slowly. And the only reason they were still breathing was because that ghost's wife had a bigger heart than they deserved. The county lockup smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Tony sat on a metal bench in the holding cell, staring at the concrete floor between his feet, trying not to make eye contact with the other men waiting for processing. His wrist still ached where the cuffs had dug in during the ride over. The booking officer had been professional, almost bored, like planting drugs on parolees was just another Wednesday. Across town, Norman sat in his own kitchen with his head in his hands. The police hadn't come for him yet, but they would. He'd spent the last hour on the phone with a lawyer who'd explained in careful terms that his disability fraud case was airtight and that his uncle couldn't help him anymore because his uncle was drowning in his own investigation. The lawyer had given him a number to call when he was ready to discuss a plea bargain. Norman hadn't called. He just sat there, surrounded by the belongings he'd accumulated over 37 years, all of it feeling suddenly temporary. Neither Tony nor Norman knew that 3 blocks from the police station, Gunwoo sat in the back of a rented Escalade, watching the building through tinted windows. He'd landed in Seattle 12 hours ago, driven through the night, and arrived in this forgotten mountain town as the sun rose over the peaks. He hadn't slept, didn't need to. The fury that had carried him across the Pacific had burned itself into something colder and more useful during the flight. Min-jun sat in the passenger seat with his laptop open, monitoring local communications. Tony Russo is being processed now. Possession charge. They're holding him for 48 hours pending arraignment. And Norman Webb? Home. Hasn't left since the police interview yesterday. His phone records show 17 calls to lawyers, family members, and 1 call to a crisis hotline that lasted 4 minutes. Gunwoo nodded slowly. The crisis hotline was interesting. It meant Norman was breaking. Good. The drugs in Russo's trailer, Gunwoo said. Remove them from evidence. Min-jun typed quickly. Done. The evidence log will show contamination. The case will collapse. And Webb's disability investigation? We can make it disappear, or we can let it proceed. Your choice. Gunwoo considered this. Margaret had asked him to show mercy. She'd said those exact words when he'd called her from the plane. His voice tight with barely controlled rage. They're just ignorant men, she'd said. They don't understand what they did. Make them understand, but don't destroy them completely. He'd agreed because he loved her, because she was the one person in the world who could ask him for anything and receive it. But his version of mercy looked different than hers. Let the investigation proceed, Gunwoo said. But ensure he's offered probation instead of prison time. Community service. Restitution. Something that takes years but doesn't end his life. Understood. And Howard Webb, the uncle? He covered up crimes. Let him face consequences. Natural consequences, no interference from us. Minjun made notes. The social media posts about them? The ones spreading their information. Let them run for another week, then have them removed. But the damage is done. Everyone in this town knows what they did now. A sedan pulled up beside them. Two men in suits got out and approached the Escalade. Gunwoo rolled down his window. Report, he said. The first man handed him a tablet. Margaret's house is secure. We've installed a full security system, cameras on all approaches, panic buttons in every room. The dog is fine, minor injuries fully healed. Margaret herself has bruising but nothing serious. The local doctor examined her yesterday. Gunwoo took the tablet and scrolled through photos of his house, his wife, his life that had been violated. The bruise on Margaret's cheek made his jaw tighten. The small bandage on Miso's side made something dangerous flicker behind his eyes. The bridge, Gunwoo said. We've mapped every angle. No cameras, just like they thought. But we placed our own after the fact. Anyone approaching that location now triggers an alert. Good. And the town? The second man spoke up. Small. Insular. Police department is cooperative but limited. The sheriff is competent but overwhelmed. The real power structure is informal, based on family connections and historical relationships. Howard Webb was at the center of it. With him under investigation, there's a vacuum. Gunwoo absorbed this. Small towns operated on networks of obligation and favor. Cut the right connections and the whole web collapsed. I want a complete profile of everyone with authority in this county. Judges, police, politicians, business owners. By tomorrow. Yes, sir. Gunwoo handed back the tablet. Now take me to my wife. The drive to Ridgeline Road took 15 minutes through winding mountain roads. Gunwoo watched the landscape pass, understanding why Margaret had chosen this place. It was beautiful in a stark way, all sharp peaks and deep forests. Quiet. Remote. The kind of place where you could breathe without feeling the weight of cities and crowds and expectations. The kind of place where two men had thought they could attack a woman without consequences. The house appeared around a curve, modern and clean against the wild backdrop. Solar panels on the roof. Large windows facing the mountains. Margaret's taste, practical and elegant. The Escalade pulled into the driveway behind Margaret's car. Gunwoo was out before the vehicle fully stopped. Margaret opened the door as he approached. She wore a soft sweater and jeans. Her hair pulled back, the bruise on her cheek painted in shades of purple and yellow. When she saw him, her composure cracked. Not much, just enough. He crossed the distance and wrapped his arms around her. She pressed her face into his shoulder and breathed out, a long exhale that carried 2 days of tension. I'm okay, she said quietly. I know. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb gentle near the bruise. But you shouldn't have had to be. It wasn't your fault. I left you alone. I chose to be alone. I needed space. We talked about this. She took his hand and led him inside. You can't protect me from everything. I can try. The house was exactly as he remembered, warm and lived in, full of the small touches that made it Margaret's. Books on shelves, plants in windows, photos of their life together scattered among landscapes and abstracts. Miso appeared from the kitchen, tail wagging carefully, a small bandage visible on his side. Gunwoo crouched down. The dog approached cautiously, then recognized him and pushed his head into Gunwoo's palm. He examined the bandage with careful fingers. The vet said he'll be fine, Margaret said. He was protecting me. Bit one of them before they kicked him. Gunwoo looked up at her. Which one? Gunwoo. Which one kicked him? Margaret sighed. Tony. The one with tattoos. But it's done now. You've already made your point. I saw the news about the arrests, the investigations. This town is talking about nothing else. Gunwoo stood slowly. They put their hands on you. They threatened to kill your dog. They humiliated you because they thought you were powerless. His voice stayed calm, but something in it made Margaret's expression soften with understanding. Making their lives difficult for a few weeks isn't enough. What more do you want? I want them to rebuild from nothing. I want every step forward they take to remind them of what they did. I want them to lie awake at night wondering if I'm still watching. I want them to flinch every time they see someone who looks vulnerable, wondering if that person has someone like me behind them. Margaret moved closer and took both his hands. You're a good man pretending to be a bad one. I'm a bad man trying to be good for you. Then be good now. You've made them afraid. You've taken away their power. You've shown them consequences. That's enough. She squeezed his hands. I don't want you to become what they feared you were. Gunwoo was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Minjun and the others waited in their vehicles, ready for orders. Back in town, Tony sat in a cell and Norman sat in his house, both men facing the ruins of their lives. And here in this house, his wife asked him to choose mercy over vengeance. The drug charge disappears, he said finally. Tony gets released with a warning. Norman's fraud case proceeds but ends in probation. Howard Webb faces his investigation without interference. And I make sure everyone in this town knows what happened, so no one else tries it. And after that, we upgrade your security. I visit more often, and those two men get to live knowing they had a chance they didn't deserve. Margaret smiled, though it pulled at her bruised cheek. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm doing this for you, not them. He touched her face gently. Are you really okay? I am now. They spent the rest of the day together, not talking about Tony or Norman or justice or revenge. Margaret showed him the garden she'd planted. They walked the bridge where it happened, Gunwoo memorizing every detail with cold precision. They made dinner together while Miso dozed in his bed, healing. That night, Gunwoo made a series of calls. The drug evidence disappeared from the system. Tony's lawyer received an anonymous tip about the contamination. The prosecutor on Norman's case received guidance suggesting probation given the defendant's cooperation. Howard Webb's investigation continued untouched, following its natural course toward disgrace and removal from office. And in a dozen online forums where people talked about crime and power and the hidden structures of society, a story began to spread. Not the full truth. Gunwoo was too careful for that. But enough truth. A story about two men who attacked a woman and discovered too late that some people are protected by forces they can't see or fight or escape. 3 days later, Tony walked out of county lockup. The charges had been dropped due to evidence contamination. His public defender couldn't explain it, said it was the luckiest break he'd seen in 20 years of practice. Tony didn't feel lucky. He felt marked. Norman accepted a plea deal the same week. 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, full restitution of fraudulent disability payments. His lawyer called it a gift. Norman called it a sentence with no end date. 5 years of looking over his shoulder. They saw each other once after that, at a gas station on the edge of town. They didn't speak, just nodded in acknowledgement of shared trauma before driving away in opposite directions. Tony found work at a different garage in a different town. He showed up early, stayed late, never complained. When customers were rude or demanding, he took it without reaction. When he saw someone who looked vulnerable, he went out of his way to help them. Norman sold his house and moved into a small apartment. He got a real job doing warehouse inventory. He attended every required meeting with his probation officer. He volunteered at a shelter on weekends, fulfilling his community service hours and then continuing anyway because the structure helped him sleep. Neither man ever spoke about what happened on the bridge, but they both thought about it every day. About the woman they'd hurt, about the voice on the phone, about how quickly everything they thought was solid could turn to dust. And sometimes, late at night, they'd check their bank accounts or their rearview mirrors or their phones, just to make sure nothing had changed, just to make sure they were still allowed to exist. Because they understood now. They understood that mercy wasn't the absence of punishment. It was the choice to let them live with what they'd done. And that was a heavier weight than any prison sentence. Gunwoo stayed with Margaret for 2 weeks before business called him back to Seoul. He left knowing she was safe, knowing the town had learned its lesson, knowing that his name would be whispered in this place for years as a warning. On his last morning, he stood on the bridge with her, Miso running ahead on his leash. The creek rushed below. The mountains stood silent witness. "Do you regret it?" Margaret asked. "Going as far as you did?" Gunwoo considered the question honestly. "I regret that it was necessary. But no, I don't regret protecting you. Even though I asked you to stop, you asked me to show mercy. I did. They're alive. They're free. They have chances to become better." He looked at her. "That's more than they gave you." Margaret nodded slowly. They stood together in the cold morning air, and for the first time since the attack, she felt the fear finally loosening its grip. "Thank you," she said. "Always," he replied. And far away in a trailer and an apartment, 2 men woke up to another day of rebuilding, carrying the knowledge that some lessons cost everything, and some mercy comes with teeth. If this story moved you even a little, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more powerful stories where the vulnerable aren't forgotten and justice always finds its way.